According to experts from Oxford University, so you know it's good, net migration will remain above pre-Brexit levels for the rest of the decade unless the government changes its immigration policies. This news comes as new figures released last week show that British jails are close to breaking point through overcrowding and what Justice Secretary Alex Chalk called the merry-go-round of short sentences, leading the government to consider plans to deport foreign prisoners. Can I just say, this is outrageous, isn't it? The government is now considering plans to deport foreign prisoners. Well, yeah, should we not have been considering those plans for quite a while? But anyway, there we go. With me now is Anne Widdecombe, a former Minister of State for Prisons and a former Brexit Party MEP. Anne, great to have you on the show. Let me start with the immigration side of things first and foremost, which is that apparently we might not have a reduction in our immigration levels that much to pre-Brexit levels unless new policies are imposed. I mean, shock horror. This isn't what people voted for, surely.
No, this is not what people voted for. And what this comes down to is that we haven't skilled our own population. And that lies at the door not only of this government, which party has been in power for 13 years, but it goes back beyond that as well. And effectively, we've relied on other people's skills, on importing other people's skills, or indeed a lot of unskilled labour simply because they're willing to do the work that some of our people aren't willing to do. And that is the problem that we have. Now, we have to do two things. First of all, as far as unskilled labour goes, we have to make sure that our own population does it. And if it doesn't do it, that it doesn't get paid for sitting at home doing nothing. But as far as the skilling goes, that's a very different matter. It means the government should have already made an assessment of the level of skills and the numbers that we need in things like health, education, whatever it might be, and that we should be planning to train our own workforce to that we simply rely on bringing in skills from outside, then yes, of course, nothing's going to go down. Why would it?
No, indeed. I think another aspect of it, Anne, as well, which very few people seem to talk about, is that it's one thing just importing a load of people to do jobs, but depending on where they come from as well, you often import their way of life, their culture, etc., and that might be diametrically opposed to a lot of aspects of existing British culture, and that is something I'm worried that we're going to see playing out on the streets of Britain in the coming weeks and months, with everything brought into sharp focus, with everything that we're seeing going on in Israel, Palestine. Just in terms of the actual prisons side of things, Anne, you mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago, I think, about how when you were Prisons Minister, you had plans to put people in temporary accommodation within prisons, not just to deport foreign criminals. They now, I think they were listening to you because they're going to do exactly what you did earlier on, and it worked, didn't it?
It worked. And that was the point that I made. I wasn't just planning to, I actually did bring in porter cabins from disused Norwegian oil rigs, and we put them down in the grounds of the lower security prisons, Category Cs, which are secure, but not requiring the degree of security which A's and B's do. And also I brought in a prison ship, which Labour derided as the hulks, and then kept for another 9 years. It's always possible to find extra accommodation if you have to. And as for deporting foreign prisoners, you have to be slightly careful for this reason. You need to be certain that if they're in prison because they have committed offences in this country, that they're not just going to go back to be released in their own country, but that they're going to carry out a sentence there. Now, usually the sentences are harsher than ours, but sometimes they're softer, so they could actually get an advantage from being deported. So you have to balance things properly. It's not easy. I'm not telling the government it's easy. What I am saying to the government is that they have sat on their hands and done nothing for far too long.
I suppose some people might think, well, look, I don't really care whether or not they serve a massive sentence abroad, as long as they're not here in Britain and taxpayers are paying for their time at His Majesty's pleasure.
Well, then you're rather dismissing the victims. And you're saying, well, it doesn't matter what they suffered, as long as we just get rid of these people, we don't care if they're going to go free in their own country. And I think that does matter to the victims. So, as I say, it's not easy, but it can be done. I'm not saying you don't deport anybody. I'm just saying there are things you have to take into account. And yes, that will free up some space, but it's not going to meet anything like the size of the challenge. And for that, we need new prison places, and we need them quickly, and they should have already been put in hand, and they haven't been because Jeremy Hunt doesn't want to spend. He is absolutely fixated on not spending. You've heard him say very recently, no tax cuts, he can't afford it, ignoring the fact that tax cuts themselves drive growth. He is ultra cautious. It's like a Boy Scout with some pocket money, and if I spend it on this, it's not there anymore, rather than, do I need this a lot? And we do need prison places.
Yeah, and especially if we're seeing some of the prisoners breaking out of those prisons anyway, in no small part due to staffing issues and overcrowding, then at some point it does appear to be a slightly false economy. And just quickly, and lastly, if that's all right, I've got to get your views on what we saw today. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer in the House of Commons speaking as a united front, saying about how they're going to back Israel, they're condemning Hamas as terrorists, all of this stuff. How do you see this playing out? We've got, by the way, in about half an hour, oh no, less than half an hour, about 10 minutes' time, I'm going to a pro-Israel protest outside the BBC as well, which I think is an interesting development. Your kind of overall take on all of that?
Well, I think they're absolutely right to be backing Israel, and they're right to be united across the House of Commons. I think that is a very major plus. The only dissenters appear to be the civil servants who have refused to fly the Israeli flag, despite the fact that the government ordered them to do so. Read my column in the Express this week on that subject. Very good column, every Wednesday. So, yes, it's right that they're united. And I think it's right also that we simply back what Israel wants to do. And Israel is the best judge of how to deal with this. It's largely their citizens. There are some Brexits there, but it's largely their citizens who are affected. And I think we must just take our lead from them. But what is disgraceful, what I can't get over, is that you have a police force which will arrest street preachers, which will roll up on doorsteps to check people's thinking, which will put people on registers for non-crime hate incidents. And yet, when people are out there demonstrating in favour of people who have attacked babies and old folk and taken innocent hostages, the police do virtually nothing.
It's strong stuff, Anne. It's strong stuff. And, well, I'm certainly not going to disagree with a word of it. It's Anne Widdecombe there, who is the former Minister of State for Prisons, former Brexit Party MEP, and I think for good reason, a regular on this show and this channel. Get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com.